Yeah, I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago, for whom none of us currently living are responsible, is a good idea. We've, tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war, by passing landmark civil rights legislation. We've elected an African-American president. I think we're always a work in progress in this country, but no one currently alive was responsible for that. And I don't think we should be trying to figure out how to compensate for it. First of all, it'd be pretty hard to figure out who to compensate. We've had waves of immigrants as well who've come to the country and experienced dramatic discrimination of one kind or another. So no, I don't think reparations are a good idea.
First of all, ignorant ass Bitch McConnell, check this out. You talk about black reparations and our compensations. This jack wrench basically said our compensation was free. Our compensation was being freed from slavery, from the Civil War, which we fought in, by the way. Civil rights legislation, which should have been a human right. Get that, you guys. You hear me? And a black president. Really? First of all, let's address the Civil War thing. As I said before, white people were not the only ones fighting in the Civil War. And as a matter of fact, they made slavery an incentive because the Union was getting their behinds kicked by the South, from what I understand. Plus, Abraham Lincoln even said it himself. He'd rather not free black people from slavery. And he believed that whites were superior over black people. But the thing is, we were freed as a byproduct. They needed more manpower, so they began to enlist black people in the Union Army. And then they fought and won. And unfortunately, many of those black people were also killed too. Look at the Devil's Punch Bowl if you don't believe me. Look that up. The North was not innocent either, you guys. Yeah, they both were pigs. And so, getting from that to it's a shame that you have, many black people had to, how could I say this, find out. Ironically, I'm doing this on Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth to all of my fellow black Americans. They had to find out that they were freed. But even with that too, think about it. After supposedly chattel slavery ended, there's other forms of it. Slavery is slavery no matter what, y'all. Peonage. A lot of people don't talk about peonage. Peonage was something that a lot of, was basically slavery continued. And some people will say a lot of that went into the 60s. From that time to the 60s. Some people will also say that's when slavery went from the public sector to the private sector. Either way, it's slavery. Oh, I didn't forget about vagrancy laws that put us in jail. Keep in mind, you guys, all this is the 13th Amendment. This was that loophole, unless you were basically throwing any kind of law and every kind of law on black people to get them back enslaved. So you had these vagrancy laws that would, you couldn't hang out at a certain time or whatever, or just stupid things, You end up basically back in slavery, in a chain gang or something like that. Then you had black codes, you had Jim Crow, you had all kinds of discriminations. That in itself is also a form of slavery because you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. You have these laws against you that basically puts you in bondage. That's not autonomy. Plus, black people were getting killed, whether they went against those laws or not, because you had a lot of these white raiders that would go into black areas and basically terrorize people. Even when we had our own towns like Black Wall Street and Wilmington, Rosewood, all that they were attacked and razed. Then being locked out of economic opportunities that a lot of immigrants from Europe got more than we had. We didn't have any of that. I mean, shoot, we can go into detail about a lot of that. Redlining, all that stuff, and black servicemen didn't get compensated for their GI Bill. Didn't work for black people. But let's go into the whole civil rights thing. Civil rights did not just benefit black people specifically. It benefited anyone and everyone. Even white people. Even today, a lot of that still does when it comes to white women and even white homosexuals in that regard. This man is so ignorant, he doesn't even know his own history. When you talk about things like symbolic gestures, like even a black president, he's basically saying, well, all the presidents should be white. That's what he's saying to you guys. That's what he's saying. So having a black president is compensation. A symbolic puppet, basically, controlled by people like you, Mitch, or Bitch McConnell. Yeah. We don't believe in symbolic gestures. Here's the reason why we don't believe in symbolic gestures, because we have a lot of things that are still discriminating against black Americans. And let me also say this. It's specific for black Americans, not any immigrants. You admitting that immigrants go through certain things does not mean anything to us, because we still go through things here that stem from even back then. The same anti-black discrimination, the same BS, where we can't even go into certain towns, so-called sundown towns. The economic wealth between blacks and whites specifically is huge, and there's a reason for that. Slavery was one of those reasons, and everything that came along with it. Even after chattel slavery, notice I'm being specific because it didn't end really. Black economic wealth we never had any of that. We never were compensated for what we did. And he talks about, there's nobody alive from that time. Well, check this out. Even during that time, you never compensated anyone. The ancestors of those who were enslaved are still alive. And you still benefit from my ancestors. So that's the reality of the situation. We don't benefit from our ancestors' toil. They were never paid for what they did. You, on the other hand, Bitch McConnell, benefit from our ancestors' slavery. The industries that were made from our toil rolled over in the other industries which benefit you. It's why you have generational wealth. It's a huge chasm between blacks and whites when it comes to generational wealth, and that was intended. So yeah, I'm not talking about the immigrants from anyone else. I'm talking about black Americans that have been here and that have had families for generations here and still never benefited from what was owed to us. There was never a 40 acres and a mule given to us. There was never any compensation for anything that was done, not only during that time, but even after, when it came to discrimination as a group, not just specifically. All the stuff that black people went through, from being labeled 3/5 of humans and then experimented on and all that. And man, no. Every black person should be demanding reparations, and don't let him get away with his symbolic gesturing, which is a middle finger as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And you talk about we. Well, don't talk about we if you don't want to live in the past, right? Huh? It's funny. He could use that we for his convenience. He won't use we when it comes to him benefiting from our ancestors, but he'll use we when he's talking about, oh, we've, you know, fought a civil war, which I'm going to repeat again. Whites were not the only people fighting in that civil war. We've given you a black president. We've done this. We've done that. Yeah, you use that as a convenience, right, Bitch McConnell? Well, here's the we again. You should be saying, we've benefited from your ancestors, enslaved ancestors. We've thrown you into Jim Crow. We've thrown you in the prison industrial complex, which still exists and is slavery. 13th Amendment says so. So put that we in there too. When it comes to you and white society, when it comes to white society benefiting from our toil. Yeah. And even a lot of the immigrants that have come over here have benefited from that as well. So stop getting off the subject. We're talking about black Americans that were born here and have descendants from slavery. So anyway, you guys, let me know what you think. Don't let these people get away with their symbolic middle fingers or symbolic gesturing, which is a middle finger to you. Bitch McConnell and anyone that thinks like him can go somewhere else. But I'll tell you this, it's one thing to bring the Democrats down, but let's not forget about these Republicans too. Keep on those Democrats and call them on that. But let the Republicans know they're going to pay as well when it comes to the political process. Anyway, you guys, have a great Juneteenth. Peace.